What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Tool Time. In this video we'll be looking at the perspective tool in Adobe Illustrator, and if you want to follow along then you can download a free template file for this lesson from the description below. Okay, I'm going to pass you over to our lead designer Rory, who will show you how it works.
Thanks Ross. So jumping straight into our Illustrator template, we can find the perspective tool over on the left hand toolbar, and the keyboard shortcut is Shift P. So selecting this, we are going to enable our perspective grid. Now you may have seen this before, you may have accidentally enabled this, and it's very easy to enable and disable. We can do this in a few different ways. First of all, I can go up to this small icon in the top left. This may equally be in the top right depending on your preferences, but with the perspective tool selected, I can simply click the small cross in the top left of this icon, and that's going to disappear now. If I enable it again, I can also go up to View, down to Perspective Grid, and then we have an option to hide grid here, or the keyboard shortcut is Shift Command I, or that'll be Shift Control I on a PC. I'm also just going to turn off our design layer for now so we can get a better look at this grid. Now by default it is set up with two vanishing points here, and we have essentially three planes to work on here. So we have a left, right, and a bottom plane as well, and we can actually change this to be just one vanishing point or three vanishing points. So to do that, I can go up to View, down to Perspective Grid, and you'll notice we have a few more options within this drop down, like being able to snap to this grid, we can show rulers, we can lock it, and we can also change some of the parameters like the color of each panel as well. But down below that you'll see we have 1, 2 and 3 point perspective options. So this is just going to change how many vanishing points we have. So if I select the 1 point perspective option, you can see this is now changing. I could equally go back up into perspective grid and select 3 point perspective, and as you can see we get some more options here as well. Now you'll also notice that we have a bunch of different handles to select and play around with. Each of these will do something slightly different, so I can adjust where the vanishing points lie, I can adjust the width of the grid as well, and I can also move it around the diamond shaped anchor point that will sit normally across the bottom of the grid. You'll notice my cursor will change to feature a moving arrow, and I can simply click and drag this to a location of my choosing. If I go back up to View and into Perspective Grid, we could also customize our own grid and save it as its own preset as well, so we have that option as well. But I'm going to go back to our default 3 point perspective, and I'll move this over to the right hand side, which is where we're going to actually use this. So I'll turn my design layer back on now, and we can simply use this by creating any objects with this perspective tool enabled. So I'm going to just grab my rectangle tool for example. Now one thing we have to pay attention to is this small icon up at the top. Now this denotes which plane we are going to be creating on. So at the moment we have the bottom plane selected. So if I click and drag with my rectangle tool, you can see this is applying to this top panel. Now one thing to note is that I can click anywhere else on my artboard and it's still going to apply to that plane. It doesn't have to be actually on this grid, but we can use this grid for snapping to, which makes it slightly easier. So I'm just going to press Command Z. What I can do though is go back over to this icon and select one of the other panels. So I've selected the left panel, which is highlighted blue now. So with my rectangle tool still selected, I'm going to create another rectangle, and I'm not holding anything or doing anything differently as to if I was just creating this normally. So I'm really just clicking and dragging and it's automatically adhering to these planes, which is really useful. So last but not least, I'll select our right hand panel. I'll grab my rectangle tool again and we'll just do the same thing here. So trying to roughly match all of these up, and I'll just snap that using the grid here. And what I can do from this point is I'll just slightly change the coloring of this to give it more of a 3D look here. And now if I turn off my perspective grid, we are left with something like this. I could equally manipulate this further. I could delete some of these anchor points and create something slightly more unique. Looking at one more example, I'm going to select my perspective tool again, and this time I'm going to change this to be a 2 point perspective. So selecting the default 2-point view. I'm going to move this grid over to where we have this text. We'll position this about here. And what I can do is actually apply existing objects to this perspective grid as well. So I've got some outlined text here. Now you can technically apply editable text to this grid, however it will automatically get converted to outlined text as soon as you do. So I've already outlined this text, and what I can do is actually use a different tool, and that's the perspective selection tool, which is Shift V on your keyboard. So selecting this, I can now click and drag on this text, and you can see it's automatically going to apply to the plane that we have selected. So again, make sure that you have the correct plane selected up in the top left hand icon, but I can create some quite interesting looking text with this method, or this could really be any other vector object as well. But that's it for a brief overview of the perspective tool in Adobe Illustrator.